What's going on, everybody? Jay here with the Incredible Events Podcast, and I have an awesome guest on the show today. Now, here's the thing. Event planners, we all go through abuse, 100%. I know I have not been able to walk after a couple of my events. I've had these massive, I don't know what they're called, boils or something on my feet. I've been exhausted, but there is nobody, and I mean nobody I've ever met in this entire industry that puts it more on the line than the guy I'm about to introduce you to. His name is Danny Duggan. He is the owner of CWE, and CWE being Canadian Wrestling Elite. Have I got that right, Danny?
Yes, sir.
CWE is a wrestling event planning juggernaut here in Canada. And Danny is also a wrestler. So this is going to be hella interesting. I'm so excited to do this one. Danny, how is it going?
It's going good, but if you're going to introduce me, you got to introduce me correctly.
Uh-oh, what did I do wrong?
It's the man with arms of steel and ass with sex appeal. He's jacked. He's fanny packed. He's Hotshot Danny Duggan.
Oh, this is going to be awesome. I love it. You know, your endorsement video of us was, you were the first one I asked for, and I guarantee it's me the best one we ever get. It was awesome.
Good, and I think I was still half asleep out of surgery when I did that one, so I've got something to top next time.
That's it every Tuesday for a typical Tuesday for you, right? So just so you guys know, there is a little bit of stuttering coming from Danny's camera. You're probably on the road, right?
No, yes. I'm back at home. We just got home last night from an Ontario tour.
Oh, okay. All right. So if you see a little bit of stuttering, that's why. It's no big deal. I mean, it's just you can still hear him just fine, so that's perfect. Okay,
it's not me physically doing the stuttering from too many hits to the
head. All right. So, Danny, I have a big question for you.
Let's do it.
How many years have you been doing CWE?
CWE began on January 23rd, 2009. So we just celebrated our 14th anniversary this past January, and we got the big milestone 15th year coming up this upcoming January.
Okay, now that's pretty cool, but I can't even imagine. I just want to dive into this quickly. You are a wrestler and you run CWE.
Yes,
so
sir.
You take the punishment from wrestlers and fans.
Yes. Yeah, there's a shortage going on in my brain some days because I'm trying to serve two masters. I got to go out and perform at the highest of levels, especially when you're trying to set an example for your own roster to go out there and kill it each and every night. But before all that begins, we got to make sure that event is set up, fans are taken care of, sponsors are taken care of, the venue's dealt with, and everything in between. So some days can be quite rough.
Yeah, I can't imagine. You know, I've thrown a lot of events, and I don't have any particular talents anybody wants to watch on a stage, but that's the case for most event planners. We're not the talent and running the event. How do you balance the two? I don't really get it.
Well, luckily I've been wrestling now for over 20 years as a professional wrestler outside of the promoting, so that I've got down pretty good. At this point, I can meet you up in a parking lot somewhere, and I can put together a very good quality professional wrestling match on minutes' notice. So that part is the easy part of my day. When I get to step through the curtain and enter the ring and have a match for 20, 30 minutes, that's my release and escape from the stress that is tour and is event day. So luckily, that part I've got taken care of, but it's everything leading up to it, making sure all those T's are crossed and I's are dotted leading up to that has to get done and takes a little bit of work.
I can imagine. So I'm going to have a lot of people that throw concerts, conferences, festivals, that sort of thing. Not a lot of people that run wrestling organizations. And I'm sure I've got a lot of people on here that are huge wrestling fans. And, whether in their childhood, it defined their childhood or currently, what are the biggest challenges you have running a wrestling promotion?
Man, that's changed throughout the years, and every year and every kind of period offers different sets of challenges. But if we're talking present day, our biggest challenge right now is just the economy and trying to find our place in what the new economy allows. Prior to the pandemic, we were with you during that time. We were doing 30 to 40 day tours across the entire country where we're on the road producing an event each and every night, Vancouver through Toronto, Ottawa. Right before everything got shut down, we were supposed to make our debut in Montreal. So we were growing at a rapid pace. Nobody in the world outside of WWE was doing what we were doing. So we were very proud and very excited about what the future held. And then the world came crashing down for 3 years, as I'm sure you're aware, as an event planner and event site host. So that affected us greatly. Our industry came to a screeching halt, just like the rest of society did. So coming out of that, we were quite excited to get back on the road and pick up where we left off. But unfortunately, in that 3-year time, everything changed. The cost of gas skyrocketed, the cost of hotels skyrocketed, the American dollar, the Canadian dollar got a lot weaker during that time. So, every major area that needs to be checked off for our industry to be successful financially changed overnight, or well, I guess over 3 years, but overnight, essentially, from going from operating to operating again. So that's been the biggest challenge. As we were doing those big tours across the country, and now we're doing smaller pockets in different parts of the country, or different provinces, kind of one at a time, opposed to one big tour across the country. Because prior to COVID, we were able to kind of take a chance on a smaller market in between because it was a lot more affordable and cost effective to do so. So when we were going across Western Canada, if we wanted to try a smaller market or a secondary market, we had enough bigger markets along the way to kind of offset it, to take that chance. Or if it didn't pan out, you weren't eating a whole ton, and you can keep moving forward and keep building your company. Now with everything being so expensive, even running a smaller scale event, your operating expenses are through the roof. So you have to be very picky and choosy about the gambles you take now, which has ultimately resulted in a smaller touring schedule. We still have a very strong touring schedule, especially still the strongest I think we're still the only one doing what we're doing in North America, but it's definitely been downsized, and we're very particular about the markets we run and have to be very careful about that, because if you take too many chances, especially big chances, and they don't pan out, the company could be in big trouble right away. So it's been a learning curve over the last 12 months, kind of adjusting to the new inflation and economy as it presents itself to us.
Yeah, I mean, I just gas alone as a challenge is, I can't imagine. I mean, what was gas when you guys before COVID? It was
like under $1 in most places, or right around $1. Now it's like $1.60 at one point. Like when we started traveling last year again, it was like $1.80 in most parts of the country we were traveling to. So like overnight, your travel just doubled. And that's a major expense when you've got 4 or 5 vehicles on the road. You've got a truck hauling a trailer, which is heavy and expensive. And then on top of it, because fuel costing so much, just across the board for travel, airfares went up. So for those familiar with our events, we always have major headliners come in from the United States or from other parts of the world to come and headline these tours and bring us some star power to add some extra oomph and add something special to the events. So prior to the pandemic, you can usually get a flight just about anywhere round trip from anywhere in Canada to the US for $500-$600. Now a lot of times you're looking at $1,000, $1,100, $1,200. Anything under that is a blessing now. So just a lot of small things that are a necessity to run the scale of event we have doubled, if not tripled, in some areas.
Wow. Okay, so aside from the pandemic, regular challenges that you've come across, as day to day over the last almost 15 years.
A big one, and we even have a story I can tell from this past week that was probably one of the most stressful events I've ever ran in the 15 years of doing this. Is just the travel on the Canadian terrain. Everything's so spread out. So if any kind of hiccup happens or travel mishap, it could really put a tour or an event in jeopardy. And we've had it happen on multiple occasions over 15 years where we've got a truck and trailer traveling a long distance, and somewhere along the way, something breaks down. And there's not wrestling rings kicking around in every city. So when that ring goes down, that's your focal point of your event. If you don't have a wrestling ring, you don't have a wrestling show. So there's been many events over the years where, that truck and trailer are getting there when the event is supposed to start, or halfway through when the event is supposed to start, and people are in their seats waiting and there's no ring yet. And that can be quite stressful. So that creates some challenges. Chelsea. So like to give you a story of this past Friday night, we're in Sault Ste. Marie. We were in Elliott Lake, Ontario the night before, which is only 2 hours away. That's an easy travel day for us, all things considered, especially in that part of the region where we're going 5 to 7 hours a day. After the event in Elliott Lake, we were supposed to be heading to Sault Ste. Marie, which is only 2 hours away. Our ring truck broke down right after the event. The alternator blew, some belt blew on the belt or on the truck. but we're thinking, okay, no problem. It's the night before. We've got, less than 24 hours to figure it out. We've definitely dealt with, more stressful situations and further distances to travel. So we thought everything would be okay. So my ring crew stayed behind with that truck. Come 8 o'clock in the morning, they're hitting up every shop in Elliott Lake, Ontario, and none of them have the part we need, and none of them have space to get it fixed. So now we're going, okay, well, we got 12 hours to figure this out. It's not as bad. We'll get to it. But because the part wasn't in the region, the guys had to hitch a ride from one town to a town almost an hour away to get the part, drive it back. But there was still no shop to get it done. So now we're in a situation where my guys are learning how to be mechanics on the side of the road, because if they don't get it done, we don't have a show that night. So to their credit, they worked, for 10, 12 hours at trying to make this happen. But I'm touching base with them throughout the day saying, hey, what's your ETA? Our doors open for our VIP ticket holders at 6 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, I'm told we're going to get there at 7. I'm like, okay, well, it's not ideal, but it's better than canceling the event. So we'll let people know 7 o'clock. 6 o'clock, I check in. We still haven't got this thing figured out yet. They thought they did, but there's been other problems that have come up, and they're still repairing this thing 2 hours away. So we have a decision to make at 10 minutes to 7. They assure me they're going to get the ring there by 9 o'clock, which is when the show is supposed to end. So we have a decision to make 10 minutes before bell time. Do we cancel the event altogether, or do we just go ahead and tell people what's going on and hoping they're going to be understanding? The ring truck assures me we're good for 9 o'clock, so we make the decision to let people know upon entry. We're going to start at 9 o'clock. If you want to get refunded, you're more than welcome to, but we're going to go ahead with this thing at 9 o'clock. 95% of the people were okay with that. So we improvise, we do Q&As, we do photo ops, we do everything in our power to keep people entertained for the near 3 hours they're supposed to be there and done, waiting for this truck to arrive. At 9 o'clock, I get on the phone with them and find out they're not going to get there till 10:30.
No, I didn't know this part.
4.5 hours after people first got in the building. Now people aren't as understanding, and rightfully so. And I was quite angry and frustrated myself, because I've been led to believe that we're going to start at 9. People were understanding. So we went from having an event that was highly attended and was going to be a really good night of business for us, a great night of entertainment for the fans, to having to refund nearly 95% of the audience, and our ring truck pulling up close to 11, ring going up at 11:15, and an event that ended after midnight that was supposed to be done at 9, to now a fraction of the audience that was originally there. And now, as a business, we're out thousands of dollars in revenue, and probably left, a negative impression on some people. For the most part, everyone was understanding, but some people were quite frustrated, and rightfully so, because they came and looked forward to an event beginning at 7, and they weren't able to stick around and see any of it. So that's the, that could be our biggest challenge sometimes, is just dealing with the realities of being in the middle of nowhere, Canada, and a tragedy like that happening. Where your ring truck breaks down, your trailer breaks down. We've also had it where there's been accidents and the truck has gone off the road just because the roads are terrible in the winter time. So those are probably some of the bigger major challenges that you just have no control over. And those can be some of your most frustrating days, because there's nothing you can do to change the circumstance you're in other than just cross your fingers and pray.
Dude, I'm blown away. I'm like, I mean, I've experienced some event stress for sure. But that, something like that, I don't know how 4.5 hours you had to entertain people.
Yeah.
Before the show even started. I couldn't imagine, I always like to, I have this kind of idea that with all of my events, every half hour, something new has to happen. Right.
Yep.
And so I plan that meticulously, but I don't even know if in your shoes, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know, I'm sure would have come up with something, but I don't know if I would have come up with 4.5 hours of pre-entertainment. I used to run a teen event company called Feel the Heat. And because there were so many people showing up to the actual show, I invented something called pre-party. And it was an hour before. It was literally the only reason to do it was just to break the lineup so that we could get people in a sufficient time. And I found it hard to fill that hour. 4.5. So is it fair to say that a large percentage of your job is improv?
I would say nearly all of it is. When it comes to event planning on an event day and the actual performance itself, you're going with the flow and you're feeling that crowd that day and making it work as it comes.
So I guess you might consider yourself a professional problem solver. I mean,
Yeah, but that wasn't a skill set I originally had. That was one that was obtained over years and near 700 events of doing this. Just to give you another example of a similar story. Oddly enough, it was the last Ontario tour we did. This was another one that ranks up there as one of the highest and most stressful situations I ever had to navigate on event day. So we're heading back out to northwestern Ontario. That's where most of these problems lay because the roads are horrible, the weather doesn't cooperate, and it's long distances. So we had a 4 or 5 day tour lined up. I believe it was in April, so just a couple of months back. We were starting in Thunder Bay, opposed to ending there. Me and my family drove in the night before and grabbed the hotel so we'd be rested and ready to go on event day. The ring crew left the morning of. As I'm getting there Thursday night, a storm is starting. So I give them a heads up, like, get on the road extra early. It's going to be rough. They get on the road extra early. They're barely out of Winnipeg. They're at Deacon's Corner, for those familiar with Manitoba. So they're just past the perimeter. Ring truck and trailer hit a black patch of ice, hit the ditch. Big accident. One of my guys gets rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. He's in rough shape. Truck is completely totaled. Trailer's upside down. It's gone. And this is on the day of the event, about 7 hours from where the show's supposed to take place. So you want to talk about problem solving. We did everything in our power to get another truck. Luckily, I had a wrestler on the road with me who runs a courier company. So he called in a favor, got one of his major trucks pulled off the road. I have a friend who owns a ring who was renting it to another organization that night, swapped out that ring. And within an hour or two, at 7, 8 in the morning, we got another ring put in the truck on the road to head to Thunder Bay. We think everything's in the clear. It's going to be tight. It's going to get there at bell time. We're going to be able to proceed with the show. My headliner made it in. He's in Thunder Bay. The rest of the crew's there. We just need a ring. So sure enough, we're on the road. We're ready to go. The truck gets to Dryden. And shortly after Dryden, there's a major accident on the highway, and the highway's at a complete standstill. So here we are again. Problem solving. We've got a solution. We're ready to go. And now my guys are stuck on the highway in a traffic jam and they can't get any further. So eventually we had to throw in the towel and cancel an event, which I've never had to do before. We've always made it work, but there was just no physical way to get this ring there. So those guys ended up staying the night in Thunder Bay. And if you want to talk about having to work some magic, that was supposed to be night one of the tour. And that was, that's the biggest town on that tour for us. So that's our moneymaker. So, we really need to accommodate, make sure that town works. But we had four other dates that week, all back to back. I had to get on the phone with 4 venues, 4 cities worth of hotels. And I had to pray once again, cross my fingers, hope for the best. And we had to back up every town by 1 day, which, as a promoter isn't ideal because all your promotion and materials are out for that night, not the day after, not the day before, that night. So we then had to effectively move our tour back a day in each and every town, which was a logistical nightmare. Luckily, the venues were very accommodating. I would say 9 out of 10 people were very understanding and accommodating that were ticket holders. But once again, we had to really work some magic and move the entire day, book new flights for our headliners and our talent to get in and out. We made it work, barely, but at the expense of thousands of dollars and pulling more hair out of my head I couldn't afford to lose. So, but we got it done. And that's, once again, just the realities of, just being on the road in this part of the country.
I have no words. That is... all of a sudden my event stress just kind of doesn't look so stressful,
As long as you don't get into wrestling, you're probably okay.
So problem solving, probably number one skill. Would you say not really a skill, but I mean, you had to craft it for sure. Having an understanding and an audience that's really behind you is critical to the success of CWE.
Very much so. And that's why when tragedy strikes like that and we have to call an audible and come up with a solution, we've been very lucky because we've been at it for so long now, nearly 15 years, that we've built up a lot of goodwill and rapport with our audiences who are very loyal. When we go to these towns as often as we do, those people become like family. We start to know them by first name and they look forward to seeing us and we look forward to seeing them on the road. So we've built a really good relationship across the country in all these different markets. So when something happens like this, where we need to say, hey guys, we really need you to be understanding here, more times than not, everybody is, whether it be, you know, a travel mishap, a postponement, a headliner not getting in properly or on time for an event, whatever the situation may be. You know, I found very early on, you know, because these problems strike very quickly when you're promoting, they're unavoidable. As long as you're straightforward and honest with people, people seem to be understanding. And I've known others in the industry and other promoters that haven't always been straightforward and honest. And when you do that, whether it be a headliner not making it in, or whether that reason, you know, explaining why that may be, or why it might not be, as long as you're honest with people, people respect it. They may be disappointed, they may be upset because they were looking forward to, you know, something specific, but as long as you're you know, a human being and you're honest with people, they seem to understand, and you get a lot further, and you know, build that respect with your audience.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I guess what do you think would be the third most important thing to you? And, you know, we got problem solving, we got an understanding and built up relationship with your audience. What's the third thing that's really critical to the success of event planning for you?
Dealing with talent. You know, it prepared me for having a toddler. I'll tell you that much. You definitely develop a patience that you quite didn't have before. You're dealing, especially with wrestling. Like when you're dealing with wrestling on any given event, I have anywhere from 10 to 20, sometimes 30 performers on one event. And that's, you know, for a single night event, let alone having them on the road for a week. So you're dealing with a lot of egos, sometimes very delicate ones. Sometimes you're dealing with entitlement. For the most part, you know, we've got a pretty good crew that's consistent with us. And, you know, we've narrowed it down to a pretty good group of guys that are on the road with us all the time. But sometimes, you know, whether it be some new talent you're trying out that just doesn't fit, that you have to kind of struggle to get on board with what you're doing. And sometimes you have headliners come in that, you know, were big stars at one time and made a lot of money and performed in front of a lot of people that have a very big sense of entitlement that clashes with the way you do business and how you operate. So you learn very quickly on how to kind of navigate the different personalities to try to come to a mutual understanding, to get everybody on board with your vision for that night or that tour, and proceed accordingly. And, you know, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's sometimes that could be, you know, one of the biggest challenges of promoting.
Well, it's funny because when I was doing shows where I would bring in acts, in the beginning I would do my best to work with these acts, but I'm not a good babysitter. So I finally teamed up with another guy who that was his forte, right? To book talent and to deal with the talent. And I honestly, I don't know how, and I'd imagine with wrestling, because some of these guys that you've worked with, I mean, they were the cream of the crop. Like they would come through that curtain and 20,000 people would scream for like, I can't even imagine that feeling, first off. But to work with that kind of person who, I'll give you a little story. So I did a TV show and I was doing these club things for a while, and I was dating someone who, she was just like, we're all young, right? And she was really not, she just kind of lived a very isolated life until we started dating. And then she started working the shows, and then she started being on TV. And then, you know, and then when we broke up, a lot of people had noticed, and I noticed, and she noticed later too, that a lot of what she was doing was trying to grab that feeling that she got from that rush of doing those things. And I can't imagine what it would be like to work with someone that had that, you know, a WrestleMania moment. And then, you know, now they're still very prolific, but they're not having those WrestleMania moments anymore. I'd imagine you have to deal with a lot of wide range of personality, we'll call it.
I would say for the most part, I would say 9 out of 10 guys, even 9.5 guys out of 10 are really good. You know, if they made it to that level, they're a professional and they understand how this works. So, and they understand if they're easy to do business with, you're more likely to do more business with them. And it's a really tight-knit industry and everybody talks. So if there's a problem child, it gets around pretty quickly. And we've had a couple of those, and it usually results in them not being booked for a while, you know, whether it be here in Canada or in other regions, because word travels quickly that, hey, this guy's a little bit of a headache. Like we had a pretty high profile story that made its round about 4 or 5 years ago. We had a WWE legend on tour with us that was just an absolute nightmare every single night. And he ended up taking money he was paid for events up front and leaving the tour already paid and leaving us holding the bag with 4 events he was promoted on that he wasn't there for. But just an absolute nightmare. But we knew going in that was a possibility with him. We had hoped it wasn't, because we had worked with other guys that had reputations that were completely fine. So we very much gave it, we'll judge you upon how you work with us.
Right.
But it checked out. And as a result, that story blew up, and that guy didn't get touched for a very, very long time. So it can be challenging, because you'll have guys that, had these WrestleMania moments, as you mentioned, or had these big prolific careers where they made hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions in some cases. And now they're coming to, our part of Canada. And for anyone listening, not familiar with the prairies, there's not a lot going on here. You got some major cities and a whole lot of space in between. So you've got guys that were performing in major cities and major arenas that, stayed in big fancy hotels and had first-class travel and accommodations, traveling through small town Manitoba, where they've got insert small town name here motel. And that's what there is. There's no Ramada, there's no Marriott, there's no even Days Inn in some of these towns. There's, the Souris Motor Inn in Souris, Manitoba. And that's where you're staying, because that's what there is. So that can be kind of a culture shock for some guys coming through. And it's not, a matter of not taking care of your talent. That's a matter of, this is what we've got to work with, because that's what's in this area. So, sometimes that could be, a wake-up call for some guys, and some don't respond to it quite well. Same thing with the travel. When you're traveling, specifically we talk about Northwestern Ontario, there's large distances before towns of any decent size. So sometimes we're sitting in the car for 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, which is different than the economics of the United States wrestling scene, where you've got a major city within hours of each other, every which direction you go. So guys don't have to deal with that as much. So you'll have some culture shock for guys that expect a certain style of treatment that just isn't there based on the reality of the economics of what we do.
Of course. Yeah. Well, that's wild. Well, we're going to do another podcast in a second here. But I always like to sum up the takeaways before I get off here. So problem solving, number one, most valuable part of being an event planner. Couldn't agree more. The second thing is to build a relationship with your audience, so that they can come along for you in the ride, no matter good or bad. They're there with you and they're there for you. And the third thing is dealing with talent. So, and there's, you gotta, sometimes you get a good one, sometimes you get a not so good one. And there's a lot of different variables there. So
to put a cap on that, before I started promoting, I had a lot of friends in the industry. I probably have a small fraction of that now that I would consider good friends, because when you become the boss and you have to start dealing with talent, relationships change quite a bit, and rightfully so, I suppose.
Yeah, what's funny is we were trying to figure it out a couple nights ago. A buddy of mine who was in from out of town, he used to come to my events a long time ago, and we were trying to figure out, because I put together 13 bars in my life, and we were trying to figure out how many people I've had to fire. And it was over 1,000 for sure. And I was thinking, I'm going, man, can you imagine how many people, when my name comes up in conversation, are just like, this guy sucks,
Yep.
And I can imagine, that your circle gets tight once you're the boss.
It has to, or you're not going to last very long.
That's true. Yeah, you cannot be a people pleaser when you're in charge. That's for sure. Well, Danny, thank you. Hang tight. We're going to do the second podcast. For everybody that's watching or listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Please, if you get a chance, subscribe, share, comment, like, review. It helps us out. It helps get us up those charts and allows us to be able to continue to do this week after week for you guys. I am Jay for Incredible Events Podcast, also Incredivent. If you need them tickets, you need that event management platform, hit me up. I'm happy to do a demo with you and get you online so that your events can improve as a result of working with us. And of course, I got to give a shout out to a staff member, as I always do. Shout out to Ben, who is running our customer service all the time. He is a total boss, and he listens to a lot of stuff. And guess what? He's doing exactly what Danny's doing, and that is build relationships even with your customers so that they always have a good experience when they come back. All right, so that is it for Incredible Events Podcast. Check us out for another one in another week. with Danny Duggan of CWE.